All right, every single day we are training our bodies to become better athletes. But when I have conversations with athletes, a lot of the time, what they are actually struggling with is a lot of the mind. You may be eating well, you may be training well, but there's something about the mind that you don't realize is missing. One thing I hear a lot from athletes is I can play well in practice and I hit my PRs, I do my thing, but then once it actually comes to the game, the meet, it doesn't happen. And so I always love bringing on guys and gals who are specialized in the mental performance side of things. And so today we have mindset coach Ron Smedley to talk about this hugely neglected part of your performance. So we're going to be talking about breathing under pressure, talking about just how to handle pressure, legendary mindset, all of these good things that you guys need to become elite athletes. So Ron, thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. So let's start off with that big mindset piece. So why do you say mindset is the most important part of an athlete's performance?
I think part of the reason why it's the most important part is because it's also the most neglected part. And not so much, like you said, it's not so much that we don't understand, that we don't have it all together, or that we're struggling mentally with certain things. I think the neglect comes from, as humans, we feel like our mind is something we should be able to figure out. Like, our mind is something we feel like I don't need to go ask another human to help me with my mind because it's mine, Whereas like different industries, like strength training, like we know, okay, like I don't know everything there is to balance strength training. Like that's a very outside thing. And even like physical skills, it's like, obviously this guy has, dunked before. He knows how to dunk. I'm going to go ask him how to dunk, But when it comes to our brain, for whatever reason, as humans, we just feel like it's something we should be able to figure it out on our own. So we struggle and we struggle and we fight and we fight. And most of the time we don't get anywhere. So I think that's the biggest part of why it's so powerful, is because of, the fact that we don't concentrate on it enough. I would venture to say most athletes probably spend maybe 10 to 20% of their time training their mind, if that even. And I always tell my athletes, there's so many aspects to the mental part of your game that, like, you should be training as much as you are physically. And some people kind of balk at that and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like, there's confidence, there's resilience, there's pressure, there's also the IQ part. Like, there's so many aspects to the mentality of an athlete that you can easily spend hours a day working on it and not cover it all. And that doesn't mean that you have to visualize for 3 hours a day. It doesn't mean you have to meditate for 4 hours a day. It just means that you have to hit on all these aspects regularly. And if you're not, you are never going to reach your full potential. It's just that simple. Um, you know, and I think that's the important part of why mentality coaches exist, is because we help lay out plans. We help lay out a foundation for, hey, you're struggling with this, focus on this for now, like work on this, um, and I think hopefully that answers your question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's good. And I like you talk about, the amount of time that you spend on it. And you have to think about, this is the same idea. I relate athletes a lot to business owners, entrepreneurs, because it requires a lot of resilience, push, control, all these things that you really got to like push through. And when you think about, one example I hear a lot about is, I believe it was Bill Gates, who used to like, he would escape for like a week to basically just figure things out, be creative, all that kind of stuff. And so
Yep.
when you think about an athlete, like, even the richest people in the world, the wealthiest in those contexts, they take time to work on their mind. They work on, escaping all of the work.
Right.
When we think about the people who tend to make more money are the people who tend to be more creative and tend to think bigger picture,
Yeah.
think more with their mind versus just working with their hands.
Yep.
So as an athlete, don't just work with your hands. You got to work on this part too. So
Absolutely. Yep.
yeah. So you talk a lot about legendary mindset. Like, I know that's a word. Anytime I see you on socials, I see that word legendary pop up in many places. I think at least one of your books has that in the title. What does a legendary mindset mean to you?
Legendary mindset to me means really just becoming the best that you can be as an athlete. Like, and that's going to be different for everyone. You know, like everybody's not going to play professionally. Everybody is not going to make it to the Olympics. Everybody's not going to play Division 1. But that doesn't mean you can't, you know? So I think, and I'm going to kind of spitball again here for a second, like go off the rails, but I think that's one major aspect that most athletes, for lack of better words, fail at, is truly believing in what they're capable of. I think most athletes believe that they can achieve whatever they want because as parents, that's what we do. Like we tell our kids, hey, you can do whatever you want. Like you just have to work hard enough. But like that's a very vague, broad statement. You know, like what does that mean? And so I think a lot of kids do, and like, you know, even older athletes, college, even semi pro, do believe that they can reach that level. But it's still understanding how and what does that take? What does that mean to do that? What does it mean to do the work? Like what is the right work? What is the right process? So when I say legendary mentality, obviously that's the name of my company, but like legendary mentality to me just means reaching your full potential as an athlete and exhausting all options to make sure that that happens. And I think too many times athletes will focus on certain things, mostly physical, right? I mean, we everybody knows physical is the main one. Like everybody wants the skills, everybody wants the, you know, to lift weights, do that kind of stuff. So they neglect nutrition, you know, like what you do. They neglect the mentality part. And those every single piece is a part of the legendary mentality, the legendary athlete in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, it's like in anything in life, we tend to focus on like we try to focus on just like one little piece of that puzzle or that one piece of that pie, and it's like no, like if you want the full pie, like you gotta hit all the different elements of it. So yeah. What about you talk about you know you have your book Breathe Legendary. So why is it important when we go into the breathing side of things? How does that impact mindset? How does that impact performance? Like why is that such a big deal?
Breathing is huge when it comes to the mind, and honestly, even as an athlete, to performing at well. You know, certain sports, obviously, you have to have certain breathing techniques to even perform, right? Um, but for a lot of athletes, like basketball players, you know, breathing techniques can actually, in the moment, even when you're running down the court or whenever you're, you know, standing at the free throw line, like if you watch sports, which I'm a sports junkie, obviously. So I'm constantly watching sporting events, and those are the things that I hone in. I'm like, you know, that guy just took a deep breath at the free throw line. Like he's doing that to calm his mind and refocus himself so that he can do his best in that moment. And so breathing techniques are huge. And there's not just one breathing technique. I mean, there's loads of them. And that's kind of what the book goes into is it goes into the details of that. But it also goes into like anxiety, you know, why we have anxiety, how we can escape it, and the different types of anxiety. And I think a lot of athletes don't even really, a lot of times, know that they have these anxieties. They don't even know some of these underlying things that are actually keeping them from performing at a high level. Kind of like you mentioned earlier, and I know we'll get into that at some point, but like, you know, performing well in practice, but not in a game. Like, you know, that's almost guaranteed that's a mental problem. That's almost guaranteed that's a mental issue. And it can be fixed, it can be overcome. So,
Yeah, so I mean, let's go into that then, because I
okay.
think that you know this is where I have athletes myself, and I have athletes that I've just had conversations with on social media where they, you know, like I said, they can perform great on in practices, and then something happens on game day, and I usually ask them like on the nutrition side, I'm like, well, are you eating anything different? I don't assume that that's the issue, but I'm like,
Sure.
okay,
Yeah.
let me just check that box,
Sure.
and they're like no, no, I'm eating the same. I'm like okay, then it's not food, you're training. And I'm like it's probably going to be your mindset. I always know that that's probably going to be it. So what are some of the things, we'll start with like what are the issues when it comes to the athletes who struggle on game day? What do you feel like are the biggest issues they struggle with?
I mean, without going into every single piece, I'll nail down some of the biggest ones. I think the biggies are how much are you practicing outside of team practice? You know, like if you're only going to team practice, you're going to struggle when it comes to performing in a game, unless you just like naturally have this ability to like do that. And some people do, some people don't. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have that ability, that natural ability, that you can't build that natural ability. So I think that's part of it, is how much time are you dedicating to your sport outside of team practice or your practice, with your organization, whatever it is, because that is going to build your confidence, which is going to allow you to play better in the moment in games. Another big one is having a routine. If you don't have a pre-game routine or even a mid-game routine, then you're asking for yourself to have issues. Like, you may not have bad games all the time, but having a pregame routine sets you up for success. It gets you in a comfortable place so that you can be confident and perform at a high level. So the best of the best athletes in any sport have a routine, a pregame, pre-performance routine. Every single one of them do. And it's not always extensive. It doesn't always take like 30 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 30 minutes. But like, those are the kinds of things that coaches can help you figure out. And even your coach on your team could help you figure those kinds of things out. But another one is, in game, having the ability to recognize when you've made a mistake and not beat yourself up about it. Like, so many athletes will get down on themselves. They'll beat themselves up and they'll just be like, oh, well, I made one mistake. Like, coach is going to yell at me. Coach is going to pull me out. Like, you as soon as you start thinking like that, it's just a compound effect, right? It's just gonna get worse from there more than likely. So I would say those are probably the three biggest things that kids or athletes in general struggle with or just don't focus enough on, or maybe not even know how to do.
Yeah, well, and that's where, I mean, I like that you reference again a lot of when you look at college and pro athletes, and
Yeah.
there's ones that stick out, like you have on your wall Mamba mentalities.
Yep.
Kobe's one of those people, and if you guys like athletes, I don't care, like middle school, high school, if you guys want a book that's easy to read, and you want to just hear some of this stuff, like Kobe's book, like giant one, it's actually on my shelf. It's I forget the name of it, but he goes through a lot of just his routines and how he does things, and
Yep.
yes, it's not like super science bag or science C or whatever, but it's at least something to get you started.
Yeah. Right.
That kind of, and there's a lot of pictures, so you get to see the things.
Right.
But he is one of those guys that you think of that has routines. And then what's his name? Was it Alabama? One of the QBs. What's Minnesota's quarterback? Vikings quarterback.
I don't know.
God.
They changed it like every other year.
Yeah, well, no, the new one, the
Right.
rookie, last year's rookie. But he's very big on routines, and you see him like during college. It would show him like sitting on the sidelines, crisscross, like
Yep.
closed eyes, like in a
Yep.
focus. That was part of his pregame routine. So like that's where do you want to walk into a game focused and clear minded, or do you want to walk into the game still thinking about what happened at lunch or what happened with
Right.
your girlfriend or whatever happened beforehand? Like, this is your opportunity to close the door on everything else and open the door to what's going on right now in front of you.
Yeah. Well, and I think like that's an interesting point that you say that, like, because I've had many conversations with athletes as well that they don't necessarily struggle so much with that part of like, like they can go into a game and they're solely focused on the game, but
Mhm.
you still, if you don't have a routine, if you don't have something to get you comfortable, like you're still going to be missing a piece, like, and that's what I think is so important for athletes to understand is that one piece, if it's a certain piece, it can be very drastic for your outcome and your performance. Like one little tiny thing can really mess things up. And it doesn't it doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case, but depending on you, depending on what you do, depending on your like how you think, depending on all so many different aspects, which is why coaches again are so important. One little thing can really throw you off and ruin an entire performance. And so yeah, I mean it's fun, it's crazy, but it's cool.
Yeah. So, what are some things like I know there's endless possibilities of what athletes can do, and it's going to depend on what they need. But what do you feel like are some of the big pregame routines, like any specifics that could be added in pretty effectively?
My two biggies that I always go with are visualization and meditation, and I think both of those are on the surface. People are like, "Oh yeah, well I know what that is. I know how." Like, like, but most people don't really know how to do it, right? And that's the thing too. Is it's just like anything else. Like if you go out and you say I know all of the nutrition facts, like I know all of the nutrition information, like everything that you have, I know all that. Still, if I don't do it in the right order, if I don't do it at the right times, it's still going to mess things up, right? Or it could still potentially cause problems. So it's kind of the same thing. Like just because because meditation and visualization, it's everywhere. Everybody talks about it. Everybody knows. Like that's not a secret, right? So,
Yeah.
but the secret is, and it's not really a secret necessarily, I guess, that either, but it's just understanding how to, when to, how much, and what to visualize or meditate. But those are the two biggies. Like, I mean, if you watch professional athletes and college athletes, like a lot of them meditate, and it's very obvious. They'll even do it on the benches and stuff like that. But visualization is massive. And visualizing your performances, not just pregame, but all the time, as much as you can possibly do, is a major, major asset to any athlete at any age. So I would say those are the two biggies. But depending on your sport, there could be a lot of other things. If you're a basketball player, obviously, you might want to have a dribbling routine. You might want to have a specific dribbling routine you go through every single time. You might have a shooting routine. You might start in a certain place, shoot a certain amount of shots, make a certain amount of shots, and then move to a different place. Like, so depending on your sport, depending on the circumstances, it's going to be different. Yeah. I mean, I would say visualization and meditation are two massive ones that pretty much every single athlete should be doing.
Yeah, and I love that too, because I mean, back to like that connection with business, it's like it's so easy to fall into the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like when you think about baseball is a lot of my clients are baseball players, and
Yeah.
it's so easy when you allow a home run or you walk somebody or you
Yep.
strike out, like all these opportunities of failure in a sense. And it's like, okay, but if you constantly fixate on that failure, it's gonna repeat. But if that visualization, I think, that's a key piece of it, is it's getting you out of that negative mindset if you do it right, of course. But
Right.
yeah, I think that's one thing I think about a lot, is a lot of us sit in that negativity too long, essentially, and we
Yeah.
don't think about what's possible.
Well, and that's, again, you hit on something perfect there. Like, when you hit those moments, when you hit those failures, for lack of better words, I don't really like the word failure, but for lack of better words, when you hit those moments, like it's the next play mentality. And again, that's not a secret, right? Like that's something everybody knows, like next play mentality, right? But it's really hard to do that in the moment, you know, and I kind of relate it to something else too, like in your personal life, the most time that you show your growth or the most time that you're going to grow is during conflict, right? When you're in a conflicting situation, you're in an unideal situation, you're either going to grow massively during that or you're not going to grow at all, more than likely. The growth doesn't usually happen afterwards, and it can, but most of the time the growth is going to happen during that conflict. That's when you prove yourself. So it's kind of in the same in the game, like the same baseball players. Like you said, if you give up a home run, are you going to give up in the next one? You're going to give up one to the next guy? Like, no, like, but that's again, we're visualizing. If you visualize your failures and overcoming them and visualize yourself going through that next play mentality, then when you're in that moment, you're going to be able to remember, hey, no, like just next play, like I'm gonna strike this next dude out. And of course that's easier said than done, but it all takes practice, right?
Yeah. So when you talk about the visualization off, like not on the field, but like prior to, on the other days of the week, do you recommend like visualization only on the positive things? Or do you think about, again, those examples of like failure where, okay, like visualizing yourself allowing the home run, but then coming back from that? I've
Yeah.
never
So
asked them to do that. That's why.
yeah, no, that's a great question. And I always recommend it kind of depends on the person. But generally speaking, like everybody should be visualizing successes first, and for the most parts, like during your visualization, like 80% of your time should be visualizing positive outcomes, like positive things. The things that you want to put into place, the things you want to achieve, and then the other 20% should be visualizing failures, things that are going to happen, or things that have happened already to you that struggled for you to overcome, and then visualize yourself overcoming those with different techniques and different strategies. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be the actual failures like allowing a home run. I also think about, one of my clients, there's a big rivalry between two teams. And so there's a lot of
Yeah.
chirping going on. And it's
Right.
like, yeah, mentally train yourself to handle those situations
Yep.
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get into, I want to get into confidence as well, because I think this is also one where athletes don't fully understand what confidence means and what it like truly looks like. There's so many different takes on confidence, whatever. But what is your understanding, or what's your definition of confidence, and what does it actually like look like for an athlete?
So for me, confidence really is just the ability to really believe in yourself. I think that's the basis of confidence is belief, right? Like if you don't believe in yourself and truly believe in your capabilities and what you're able to achieve, you don't really have confidence. Like, you can't have confidence without belief. So I think that's where it all starts. And I think that's the biggest thing to me about confidence is, you know, do you believe that you can drive to the bucket on this kid and score on him? Like, if you don't, then you don't have the confidence, right? So, and I think for most athletes, having enough confidence to actually play at their full potential is hard, right? It's really, really hard. And it's one of those fleeting things, kind of like you said, like everybody talks about confidence, but what does that really mean? How do you really get it? And honestly, like, the time tested method for gaining confidence and being more confident is more reps. But again, I come back to visualization because visualizing is so huge. Like it really is. Like visualization will give you confidence in those moments, in those times. So you have to put in the reps. If you're not putting the reps, you're not going to be confident, right? You can say that you are. You can talk a big game. You can talk trash. But when it really comes time to perform, you're going to underperform 99% of the time. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's
All right,
good.
all right,
Yeah, I think it's yeah, it's just something that I really like. You emphasize the you can talk the game, but if you didn't actually put in the work, yeah,
right.
it doesn't matter. It's like, talk the talk, walk the walk, but it's like, you have to actually think about for yourself, what does that actually look like? It doesn't mean just doing the thing in front of people. It means doing the thing when nobody's watching too.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I want to give you an opportunity to like more as an open-ended kind of approach. This can hit on, again, some of the things you've emphasized with visualization, but also some of the things that athletes that you also know are missing. Maybe we didn't already talk about. But if you're speaking to the high school athlete listening and they want to become more mentally resilient, mentally consistent, like what would you tell them? And like, yeah, let's just go. What would you tell them?
I think building resilience. It's hard to build resilience without failure, right? Without going through hard times. Like that's what resilience is, right? So if you're not pushing yourself enough to fail and you're just staying in your comfort zone, you're never going to build resilience. You're never going to have that resilience for when the performance, because performances don't care, right? Performances do not care what you've done to prepare. The performances do not care what you're thinking about. Like things are going to happen the way they're going to happen, regardless whether you're prepared or not. If you're not pushing yourself enough to have failures and to truly grow as an athlete, and you're constantly just trying to be comfortable, then you're going to struggle in those moments. You're going to struggle with resilience. So I would say that's the biggest thing is continue to push yourself to your maximum, continue to push yourself to your limits, whether it's with nutrition, whether it's mentally, whether it's physically, like literally all of those things you should push the limits of and get as much help as you feel like you need to achieve those things and to push those things to the maximum.
Okay, so for those athletes listening, I want to leave this open ended. What would you recommend they do when they stop listening to this podcast?
Uh, the first thing that I would do is really think long and hard about, are you doing enough? Are you truly doing everything you can to be the best athlete you can be and reach your full potential? Are you working with a nutritionist? Are you at least researching, like reading books? Like, like you should be consuming as much. And that's one thing. I'm gonna go slightly off the rails here and then I'll get back on topic. But like that's one thing to remember too is that the importance of working with a coach, whether it's a nutritional coach, a strength training coach, a mental coach, is the time we can save you. Like, sure, almost all the information we can give you is probably out there on a video, right? It's probably in a book. But do you really have the time to read 3 or 4 or 5 books, do you really have the time to watch hours and hours of videos on nutrition, hours of videos on mentality, hours of videos on strength training? Like, so like the time that a professional coach can save you is probably the biggest asset that you can have as an athlete. But to get back to the point, like, absolutely consume as much information as you can. If you can't afford a coach and you know that you can't, and like that's out of the question, there are still ways that you can maximize your performance by consuming as much as you can. If you can afford a coach, get one for whatever it is, whether it's nutrition, whether it's strength training, mental, doesn't matter. Get the coaches you need if you can afford it. But that would be my biggest thing, is really self-reflect on all of the different pieces of what it takes to be great. And are you doing the most you can do? Are you absolutely doing everything you can? And if you're not, then figure out whatever it is, whether it's talking to your parents, whether it's talking to your coaches, whatever you have to do, find out, how can I maximize these things? How can I fix these so that I can put myself in the best position to be that maximum potential athlete that I know I can be?
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, I like the phrase, I started to say this more, is do the most with what you got. You
Sure.
know, like you
Yep.
said, like you may have to rely on watching and reading things on your own, but if you can get a coach, like figure out where you need the
Yeah.
coach the most, mental
Right.
performance, whatever, and then just continue to build from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. What speaking of consuming content and like, hey, where can like taking in stuff so that you can learn and grow, what are the best places for athletes to connect with you and check out your stuff? Because I know you have social media wise, you have the books, you got a few different things.
Yep. Yeah, so for me, I've got several videos on YouTube, some more in-depth videos where I basically do like a one-on-one session where I'm talking about specific things. So they can look me up on YouTube. Like you said, I have books. I have Dominate with Your Mind is a book that I have. Breathe Legendary are both books that I have, and they're sold on Amazon. The links are all over my social accounts too. So like, if you find one of my social accounts, you can basically access everything from there.
Yeah,
But also, like, I'm always encouraging, athletes to watch my short videos as well, but reach out to me. Like, I will have a in-depth conversation with any athlete that wants to. Like, I genuinely love doing this stuff. I genuinely care about athletes and them reaching their max potential. Um, yeah, obviously, I can't, everything can't be helped for free or in the chat. Like, some things just simply we have to get on video and we have to talk about and discuss, or meet in person, whatever it is. But I will do everything I can to help any athlete that truly wants to actually level up their mentality, because I just understand the importance of it. I know how important it is. And without it, your chances of success are very minimal. I mean, regardless of what you do, it's just that true. Now, there will be a lot of athletes that will probably watch this and be like, well, I know like there are definitely college players and there are definitely pro players that don't have the mentality. Sure, yes, there are examples of players who do not have the right mentality, but 90% of the time, those players are not actually reaching their max either. Like,
yeah.
sure, they may be playing pro. Sure, they may be, but they're not maximizing. You look at the absolute greats, the Serena Williams, the what's Phelps, I forget his first name.
Michael
Michael
Phelps.
Phelps, yeah, Michael Phelps, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, like Curry, like Clay Thompson, like you name any great athlete, like, and most pro athletes work with personal mentality coaches and personal health coaches. Like, they have personal coaches, they have people on their staff, but they also have their own personal ones because they can connect with them more. They can get in more in depth with a personal one. So bench warmers, players that are getting, 20, 30 minutes a game, like a lot of those players that stay in those roles in those careers, there's a good chance that, sure, they may not be putting in the work they need to, uh, but they're also probably not working with a mental coach, a health coach, all these different things to truly maximize their potential. So,
Yeah. I mean, I love back to Kobe being a great example of
yeah,
that, where he he talks about what in the NBA where he's putting all these extra reps, doing all these things, and then he's
yeah,
watching like the rest of his team, like what the heck? And I think
right,
that's where a lot of the negativity towards Kobe at the beginning was, because he was like, what the heck? Like,
right,
more hungry.
right,
And
absolutely.
do the most with what you got. Like
Yeah,
if you have like, pro level talent, then let's get you pro level. If you have D1 level talent, let's get you D1 level. Let's not settle for lower when you know you have more in you.
that's right. And actually, you hit on something else again that's really, really important for athletes, and that is, if you're in high school and you want to play in college, if you're not studying college, why do you think that you're going to go to college and play at a high level in college? Like you have to study whatever level you want to get at next. And I always tell my son this, like, I always tell him, like, we always hear stories about, pro players, and they're like, oh, well, it takes 2 or 3 years to adjust to the league. But no, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, if you're studying what's coming next, there's no reason. And that's why sometimes you have athletes that come through that, like, they do already, they jump right in and they're ready to go. Well, it's partially because they put the work in. And the other part is they studied the next level to make sure they were prepared for that next level. So whether you're in middle school, study high school, study college, study the pros. Like, always study the next level that you want to be at. That's how you get to success.
Yeah, I love that, and that's a great way to end this. Is yeah, that right there. So for listeners, make sure that you guys are checking down below because you have Ron's links down below in the caption, the show notes. But Ron, I just want to thank you so much for hopping on and really unpacking all of these really essential topics that again athletes y'all got to start really putting in the work on this. So yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks again, Ron.
Yep. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, of course. And as always, listeners, keep striving for greatness.